was hoping, unless there's something else on your mind, to really talk about outreach and what we want to get out of the meeting. Lauren, this is hopefully on the idea that we'll actually get you know people. So I would like to. I think maybe that's the best thing we can talk about, and see how we can how we can try and drive some attendance, and maybe that's even something we can talk about when we have the public hearing itself. Get members of the public, like, what do you think would be helpful to try and get people interested in this area? So, what I was thinking about, just in terms of the meeting, and this is, open to whatever you'd like to do. I thought, since we'll be Zoom boxed instead of sitting at one of the rickety tables in Paulson, that we would just start and introduce ourselves. Kind of go around the room, and kind of not dissimilar from what we did before, just who you are, a second or two about yourself, and then just perhaps even just a couple of words on why you chose to do this, and what you'd like to know from people who are there. This is, again, presupposing we actually have people. I hope that my anxiety on this is ill placed, and we'll have 100 people in the Zoom box, but we'll work that out. And then what I was thinking that might be good is to start with just a little bit about what's a charter. I don't mean lecture, but I mean just a couple of minutes on, here's this document and the types of things it covers. And then I was thinking, and tell me if you think this would be boring, but I was thinking that maybe maybe Lauren or maybe Joan or could go and give just a little history as to the couple of times that we've approached this. And I mean, sort of the last few charter reviews, unless you think it's a bad idea, unless you think that might, set people,
I prefer
backward
not.
looking.
I'd prefer not to go down that path. I think we want to look forward looking.
All right.
I do. Do we want to go through the agenda, or are we jumping?
Oh, yeah, I mercilessly just jumped ahead. Sorry.
And Peggy is on, so I don't know if we want to make her wait through a different conversation. Yep, she's here.
Oh, bring her in. Excellent.
So if we could just quickly approve the minutes from last meeting, and then I'll bring Peggy over.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're so good. Excellent.
Well, Lauren does great minutes, so what can you say?
You do spectacular minutes. There you are, Bob. Hey. You wore a jacket for the event. I didn't know it was.
Yeah, I figured I'd dress up to.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Hello, Peggy.
Appropriate respect for this commission. I showered too.
Oh, good for you.
Excellent. A rarity in COVID times. So, Peggy, this is your happy commission. Thanks for coming. Today, I think our primary mission is to talk about the public hearing, and just to begin thinking about how we'll hopefully get people at the hearing and what we want to know from them. Do you want to? You're the one that you led the happy group that charged us. Do you want to say a few words?
Well, I think I guess I was planning on giving you. I couldn't attend your last meeting, so I had some thoughts about, and maybe this isn't the appropriate time. We can do it on another one, where I've got my laundry list of things. Well, if you want this to be a quick meeting, maybe that's not the day. I can come back another time.
Well, I am curious. Are you planning on attending the public hearing?
I will. Yes, of course.
Because on the off chance you're the only public we get, I wouldn't mind having your laundry list there as part of the hearing. I think that actually might, and even if not, I think people who would do attend might find that very interesting if you're comfortable in that setting.
Sure. I can certainly do that, and some of it's minutia, and then there's just some more high level.
Yeah, you want to give us a couple of themes for what you're thinking? I'm pretty sure we know from your compatriots about the various issues with board interactions. It seems to be a recurring theme. So I think we're well versed on that, and we'd like to meet with your board again when we're the other side of the public hearing, so we can even talk about specifics on that regard.
Okay. Well, I think there's the interaction of the boards, and especially as it relates to the budgeting process. And it was funny, I actually went and looked at the charter again briefly this afternoon because it's been a long time since I looked at it, and I thought, if you read it, why do I even get myself involved in the budget process? I mean, it's not even it's not even part of my job, really. If you read my job description, it doesn't refer to anything about putting a budget together, overseeing finances and spending and making sure there's no role whatsoever for the town CEO. If you read what it actually says in the budget process, and it says that the Board of Finance actually is the one for making the budget. So I'm kind of like, why did I spend all this time for months with the town departments? Because I think that's one of the frustrating things that happens is that the town departments get dragged through 3 different boards, right? In terms of having to provide their, budgets, or either reviewing what they've done and then also what they're doing going forward. So that just is an observation about actually simply reading the document. It was kind of like, yeah, what is my job here? So I think that is something that kind of fits why there's some lack of and confusion, I think, amongst the boards at times about what their roles should be in the position. I think the other big theme is the lack of continuity in the CEO position, and
Yes.
the part of that is due to the rapid turnover every 2 years, which I'm sure you've heard that kind of feedback. It prevents any kind of continuity and planning and management. And then I think it's also the challenge of having, the first selectman has 17 direct reports and, oh, by the way, is responsible for administering, as I read again today, all 35 boards and commissions in town too. So,
And you're doing a hell of a job, I have to say, on that front. It's
including the ones that we create,
Yeah.
in addition to the ones that are actually, so, it's kind of that theme of, if you reflect on any of you, I'm sure many of you have business experience, and, I think there's like 5 to 7 is recommended for a CEO direct reports. And so we have 17. And then there's also the, volunteer-based organizations that don't report. And yet somehow the first selectman, or not the first selectman, I guess it's the Board of Finance, is responsible for their budgets, making their budgets. So I think also clarifying that role of outside nonprofit organizations relative to the town and how they interact. And there's some guidelines around that, but the charter doesn't really talk about that at all, I don't think. And that's always been a kind of contentious issue as the budgets go through as well. So trying to have some better guidance around that. So that's another kind of theme. And then I can talk, there's a lot of specifics about the town meeting and just the dollar thresholds, which I think should be based on really the budget size, and not, because you're really trying to just make sure that the boards aren't going crazy, spending what the community, approved, right? So, and there's some reasonableness, but it should be a percentage of the budget rather than these $50,000 dollar thresholds. The light item transfers is, and this is, once again, I think if the CEO is supposed to be responsible, like a traditional CEO role, to not be able to take $500 from one department and move it to another department is extraordinarily handcuffs any kind of management of the budget during the year. And then if you have to go and in order to make any changes to that budget, you have to go through this, process of going to the Board of Selectmen and then going to the Board of Finance, literally to do some very simple, sometimes management, because it's hard to be predictable, especially when you have emergencies pop up.
Well, that brings up a good point. Do you think you'd be comfortable talking about, again, assuming we get bodies, so if your board can do whatever it is to try and use your platform to talk about driving people to public hearing, I'd appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think you'd be comfortable talking about sort of what it's like to run the town in an emergency? Because I'm the number of people who have any clue what you're doing day in, day out that's different in COVID is probably like you, Bruce. I mean, it's like a big list. And I'm wondering if that wouldn't be something to talk about, when we have people there, because it's the reality. It's going to drive part of what we're thinking.
Yeah, and that's actually one of my other themes, is about how our charter handles emergencies, and the first of all, that we have this 21-day limit, which is, versus the state of Connecticut can be in state of emergency and yet our town wouldn't be. Seems contradictory, unless the board keeps for example, perfect example. So we decided not to renew the state of emergency in September. There was some board members that felt like, why we can run everything through the board and make decisions. And so I think that was fair enough. We've gotten through about 6 months of operating in kind of COVID land. But then, like, the governor is still passing executive orders, and there are some executive orders that impact how we handle those things at the local level. And so, how we're going to handle it, which is totally fine, is we're going to now handle it at the board level. But to me, it's still confused about the board passing some sort of amendment to ordinances, and all. It's confusing, because it's like, how do you make it emergency, but we're not under a state of emergency, and we're amending some of our ordinances. So those types of things, I think, are important. This is unprecedented territory, because the town has never had to be in this extended state of emergency. But I think what I've heard from other CEOs is they're tied to the state automatically. So you don't have to go through this kind of process, which does become political at times, about, are we going to let them be under state of emergency? So, and I think it's more, and then if it's just local, I think it's important. If we have something in Madison, we get a storm on the shoreline, it doesn't affect the whole state. The governor's not going to declare emergency for that. That's when we enact our local powers to address local concerns. But when you have the whole state in the state of emergency, I just think we should have some sort of designation. Now, under that, you might have different levels of what the first selectman can do. It's basically, right now, our emergency powers is like the first selectman controls everything, right? So that's not right either. So I think having some sort of gradation of, because no one envisioned being under state of emergency this long, right? It was like, oh, if we get a hurricane, right? That's the experience of the town, or a blizzard, or so I think trying to figure out a way to weave through that in case we have more pandemics, if we have some other horrific event that puts us in a state of emergency for like 6 months, where you have the, clearly lined out what makes sense for the first selectman to be able to do versus what the is needed from the board of selectmen. So those are thoughts that are, and it can, we can talk more about. I'm happy to give some thoughts on it, but I think there's a lot of experience throughout the state, because every town's been different about how their charters read and how they've woven through this experience. And, I'm hoping there's going to be some opportunity, like at CCM or something, just to talk about some of this stuff. So and how can we fix these issues so that things run more smoothly in the future?
So one of the things we did is we had Ira and, what was the name of the other guy, Lauren?
Peter.
Well, there we go. So Ira and Peter at last time. So that was very helpful, Peggy, as you and I chatted about. They cleaned up many. We've been running a little bit on rumor as to how we're supposed to be doing this. So they able to get back to us also with just a cursory review of the charter from their perspective. And I asked them a bit about what towns were doing for emergency powers. I guess that's all over the map, and Lauren knows some of that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good, because that's kind of, and I also had under COVID is the budget referendum timeline. You're going to have to really look at that whole thing now, because we're going to be going to.
Believe me, I got trapped in that, as you may recall. The town. I'm still ever appreciative of the townspeople let me increase taxes by $1 million because of the budget timeline. We had to tell them what we were doing with it, but it was surprising I got away with that. But we had no choice.
Well, but I think it's also that the absentee voting and early voting and those changes that are likely to come out of the legislature, we have to change our referendum timeline. So because it's too tight and too restrictive about how we go through the process and send the budget to referendum, and when we actually have to hold a referendum, it's like problematic. So there's a lot of things there that really need to be, and then like I said, I have other things too. So I know you wanted to make this a quick meeting. The only other one thing I will say, I was thinking about this because I was reading the charter and it refers to him and his and for selectmen.
Right.
We really need to update the language in the charter and make it more inclusive.
Oh, can I actually ask you a question on that point?
Yeah.
I had asked Peter and Ira when we were in the meeting, like it's nice that you're the first selectman. Well done, because that's from statute. Are you running into any towns who have fixed that? I mean, must we have a first select man or select woman? You know, is there another term of art that exists that you've run into? They pointed out it's actually the moment it's still in the statute. So we need to.
I don't know. I don't know. I know that.
This seems so weird.
Well, I'll give you just, for example, what I had to deal with just running for office. What do I put on my sign? Do I put for select woman or do I put for select man? You know, and then what's on the ballot? The ballot is the first selectman, right? That's the title that's on it. So it is technically it is for selectmen, and I didn't realize that was a state thing. I thought it was just our charter said that. And so, you know, I don't know if that's a state-driven thing. You know, you could just say first select person. I mean, it doesn't really need to be one way or the other. Or you can change the name of the position altogether. I know Massachusetts, I remember Googling this at one point, and I think they've done a lot more in terms of, you know, innovative thinking on this. So it's worth exploring. I don't know if we want to change. I think a lot of people like the name, you know, but it's just it's just outdated. And the way the charter is written is outdated. So
yeah,
I'll let you guys figure out the the way to change it, but I'm just highlighting that as
we'll work the word imperial in. It'll be nice.
Exactly. Right. Royal Highness is fine. I mean,
yeah, exactly. we'll put that in place.
Learned one.
Yeah. By the way, I'm sorry if I don't know this. Peggy, do you know everyone who's on the screen?
I don't actually. Obviously, Noreen, it's good to see you again, and I'm happy that you're serving with us.
Thank you.
And I know Joan, and I know Liz and Lauren, obviously, but the other three gentlemen I don't know.
Rob, Dave, Matt, you want to do a quick hello?
Sure. Peggy, Matt Gordon, very nice to meet you. Been a resident for about 4 years now in Madison, and loving it so far. So I'm really happy about this opportunity to serve our town.
Dave?
Hi, Liz. Dave Osterman. I've been a resident for about 13 years. Yeah, I thought this was a great opportunity to contribute. So I'm happy to be on the board, on the commission.
Thank you.
Peggy, we did meet once. We had a conversation at the railroad station. You were campaigning, and I was on my way to a conference in Los Angeles, of all places. I'm a somewhat new resident. I'm in the social science directorate at the National Science Foundation is my employer. I'm a political scientist who used to teach the local politics course at the Pennsylvania State University.
Right from Happy Valley to the happiest town I know.
That's true.
Well, and so you're probably, you know, learning a lot about New England town government, which, you know, disclosure to everybody people who don't know me here, you know, I grew up in the Midwest and Southwest. And then I was in New York City for many years. So I moved here about almost 15 years ago now, because my husband grew up here, and Liz knows my husband's family. And so I didn't even understand what a town meeting form of government was or what a selectman was until somebody knocked on my door campaigning for selectman. And then I was like, oh, this is interesting, you know? So, so it is kind of newer to me. And I think that's where when I approach this job that I have now, I kind of look at it more from maybe a corporate background, somebody who says, oh, I'm town CEO. So you kind of used to those traditional functions and the way you manage town, which is different than government. So you can't expect it to be like that. And I'm learning, though, where you can kind of find maybe a little bit more efficient way to do it, but still keep that public service, public government kind of characteristics of it. And then the town meeting it was a novel thing that I'd never experienced. So, and I was on the Board of Finance for 3 years when we went through some really turbulent times. We had
a budget go down during those 3 years.
Yes,
it was exciting.
Yes, twice.
That has absolutely nothing to do with
Twice.
Peggy being on the board. I want to make that very clear.
No, it was not.
Maybe a little, no.
I think Fillmore was the first selectman, so we can blame Fillmore for that. But, so it was and I kind of got a full-on experience of when people are eager to have their voices heard, how they can gather and impact things. So anyway, I'm sure this will be educational for all of you that are newer to the area and this type of form of town government.
So I grew up in Greenwich, which does have a town meeting form of government.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the catering's better.
I was going to say a much fancier building.
Yeah, exactly.
A nicer auditorium than Polson, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I was thinking it's the perfect transition because the topic that we want to talk about was getting the word out, and I'm curious, really, Peggy, maybe if we could start with you, but also to everybody, how should we engage people on this? So first thing, Peggy, I mean, you've got a board. I don't know how many people are coming to the selectmen meeting, but is there something you think people are paying attention to? Aside from your phone calls, is there?
I mean, what I will do, I apologize. When is your public hearing again? When's your public hearing?
It's a week from Thursday.
It's February 25th.
Okay, so I will put that in my weekly update on Friday for sure. That is happening, because I think it is an important thing that we get the word out. And we'll also use our Madison alerts to send out, information with the link on it. So, that will hopefully get to a couple thousand people at least in terms of getting out there, and then through social media. I think also having the town committees, do blasts to their membership, to make sure that people are aware of it with the link, would be good. Has the source reached out to you? It's a little late, I guess, to get it in time. Joe,
not to me.
Okay. I mean, certainly, emailing Jesse and just saying, hey, you should, cover this, is always good. And those are
the announcement had to have gone in, right? Because there's a requirement to make that announcement, right, about the public hearing.
There is, but it's, what I will say, probably 3 people actually read those. Maybe, unfortunately, they're
and 2 of them are Gus Horvath.
Yes. So, and what we can do is actually ask Rita to put something prominent on the webpage.
Okay.
But I think getting like Jesse on this, and maybe doing a piece on your, the charter review. I mean, he's aware of it, he's been to our meetings. He knows this was coming. He probably plans to reach out, but he might be able to do something because it's Zippo 6 at least anyways.
Yeah, it's probably
comes out,
He did do an article on the whole process. So hopefully now that he's gotten a notice, he'll follow through. Usually he calls up somebody, but he didn't call me, so I don't think he called anybody else on the committee.
Yeah.
But it would be great to get that word out, because a lot of people aren't on social media, as I'm learning.
I'm just trying to think in terms of other, the library is one that we could request. This is what I'm trying to coordinate better in getting communication out. The library actually, part of their kind of agreement with the town is to actually act as a source of information for town events. And I don't think we've ever really used their email distribution list. And so I could talk to her about, this might be one that would be good because they have their own, ways of reaching the public. And I think like in, kind of old fashioned terms, it used to be like you could go in and dust off a stack of, town budget information or whatever on a table as you walked in. But really, if you read what the agreement is that it's to provide, be a resource for information about what's happening in town. And so that's another avenue. You just reminded me because I remember talking to somebody about this recently, to talk to them about trying to leverage that they could, and then the chamber is another option as well.
And if I could sort of open to the members, you guys have harboring any networks? So Matt and I had extensive conversations about him helping to be the communications chair, as in I texted him during the meeting. So Matt, it's important, I think, to have somebody who's like inbound to do it. And Matt, if you could help, just coordinate us in this regard, but it's kind of everybody's job. Anyone sitting on a particularly good network or ways you think we could do affirmative outreach?
So, one of the things I was thinking about too, so my wife is president of the Newcomers Club here in Madison, so it's a pretty big network to blast it out. So I guess my question with that, and she's happy to help with this, but there are other clubs, groups in Madison too, and maybe like developing an email list of them so we can blast it out and they can get it out to their team members. That's one way. The other thing too is about Facebook. I know that not everyone's on there, and sometimes social media raises eyebrows, but there is a function on there too. If the town has a Facebook page, is to put like a calendar invite or like I'm interested in going, and it's a good way to keep people engaged, and it's upfront for them in their Facebook feeds.
Like that.
I've heard a lot of people say that they use that town Facebook. For notification of events. I think that's a lot more popular than I originally thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if she sets up actual events. So that's a good point. I'll talk to our Rita, who's our webmaster and also handles the town Facebook page, because maybe she could actually start doing events because we have a town meeting, which I don't know if you're aware, our first and hopefully only virtual town meeting is going to be Thursday night. And there's actually only going to be one agenda item now, which is the Island Avenue lease renewal for one more year. And I know she did out some notifications about it, but I don't know. Lauren, do you know, does Rita do actual meeting events?
She does not. We had talked about it, Peggy, in the beginning in that communications team meeting. And she said it was a very daunting task. And we had talked about then just having events for Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Board of Ed. And then this would obviously fall under BOS because they're an ad hoc committee of your board. So I think that that's something that we should bring back to her to actually create the events for.
Okay.
Yeah, currently it seems like it's a notice, not an event.
Just a post, yeah.
It's just a post, but the nice thing is it does link you to the calendar so that you can register there, so.
One of the things Peggy brought up that I think is a great idea, and it's a lot of people are going to each committee, town committee. And really, if we put together an invitation, very, simple invitation with the Zoom link. I don't know if we can do that ahead of time. I know sometimes that's caused problems with people getting in and causing problems, but something like that, so that every chairman or whoever the clerk is for that committee could get it out. Those are people that are working with this charter every day. And so I think it would be at least a group, but I think that's a great idea that Peggy mentioned.
I think even just linking it to the calendar event is nice because you click on it and then it's immediately join the Zoom meeting. So you can put that in there.
So is there a mailing list of the chairman of the various committees? Can we just, maybe we can just say, if you want, Lauren, I'll send you a text for a note and just making it a point to invite everyone. And that's a great idea. Noreen, would you mind going to the RTC and letting them know it's there?
Yep.
And Joan, I'm reasonably confident that you would find whoever is in charge of the DTC and kindly let her know.
Mhm.
That would be wonderful as well.
Sure.
And you know, I guess probably it makes sense to go to I'll reach out. Who's chairing Board of Ed these days? Oh,
Galen.
Galen,
Galen.
call.
Yeah, so maybe I'll reach out to Galen specifically, just because Board of Ed always tends to be a pretty big mover, and I'll send it. I've already sent a text out to Jean.
So,
Hey, Joe, actually thinking along those lines and kind
Yeah,
of
sure.
thinking outside the box, you know, you mentioned the Board of Ed, but, you know, what about the you know, and just spitballing here, but, you know, going to the schools themselves and, you know, getting the social studies, you know, teachers to, you know, reach out to their kids and, you know, maybe give an extra credit assignment if their parents join the meeting, and then they could have some kind of discussion about it. I don't have any, you know, I don't have any connections, you know, to the school other than the fact my son goes. And I know that there's
Hey, that's something.
a civics class at the high school level. There's a civics class, but, you know, when you know, if you can get kids to pester their parents, that might be a good opportunity to, you know, to increase the participation.
And also notification through Backpack Express as well.
Yeah, I think that I think those are great. I unfortunately have no contact at all with the school. Dave, you want to try and suss that out and see if you can, you know, find the right person to poke at, and if we can help.
Well, it is really Rita also.
All
Yeah,
right.
with the,
So
with
on
the
a future
approval of the
agenda, we need
superintendent.
Rita.
So maybe Lauren, we talked to Rita about also, you know, including the school. She would need to clear that obviously with the superintendent, anything that goes through their email list, but we could recommend it. It's interesting because I get barraged with this civics class assignments of people contacting me about.
There's something kind of great about that.
Very well. It sounds great, but I'll just say it's been an interesting process with these kids reaching out on their projects and sometimes don't plan their time. They don't plan their time very well in advance. But you know, it is a thought of, you know, having those students listen into some of these meetings now that everything's virtual. And then, you know, because the public hearing, I have to say, I mean, is this going to be guided at all by you, Joe? Or are you going to have like topics that you'll ask?
Well, so we were just talking about that before,
Yeah.
you know, before Lauren let you out of the dock, and it sounds like, and you guys tell me if you're under the same impression. It sounds like this first meeting we need to largely be inbound. So the bright idea I had was, you know, hi, here we all are. Talk about the thing. Talk a little bit about the process, but largely I was going to do a few moments on the charter itself and then see what comes inbound. I mean, we can pose a couple of discussion questions. A reasonable one would be, you know, how many of you have been to a town meeting? Do you find the town accessible? We're in emergency times. What do you think the town should be doing? Have any of you served, you know, or approached a board? Did you find that you were able to participate well? I mean, there are a couple of questions I could give. It sounds to me like our job is supposed to be listening in this first meeting, though, as we've learned in recent times, I don't think we need to be quite as cramped in our understanding of how this process goes as we once did.
Well, because
I mean,
I would worry it's just, you know, somebody showing up with a gripe and then you're just kind of sitting there. That's why, yeah, I mean, I think having it a little guided, at least by topic maybe, or, you know, might try to like narrow down. It was funny, I was going through my slides last year's State of the Town presentation. I kind of gave an overview of town government, just org charts, and I can send you those. But I mean, to me, sometimes it's like, here is like the town operation structure. Here is the town government structure, you know, visually. I was surprised like how many people really don't understand any of that, like what's volunteer versus what's professional. And so just a thought, I can send you last year's presentation. There might be like a slide or two. You might think like, oh, that could help me.
Yeah,
or,
please. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I'd be, yeah, I can talk about that greatly. I think a lot of it depends on who comes. Even if I get someone with a gripe, we can at least ask questions. I'd rather have 30 people on the call and somebody who starts off complaining, because once you get a chance to ask questions and go back and forth, it might empower other people to speak. But I mean, it strikes me that the questions are always the same, in terms of how are you relating, how are different, how are things different for you in this time, how are you accessing government, is there anything that has brought you onto this call today, specifically, and I suppose we could always ask the Al Goldberg, aspirational question as to, what do you, when you think of town government, what do you think it should be? But yeah, I mean, we can do that. I did want to spend just some time and talk about what a charter is or isn't. So hopefully we don't have the, questions like affordable housing. That's a regulatory, statutory thing, not a charter thing, or, shellfish commissions, though I love them. That kind of thing.
or the budget.
Yeah, how much it should, we should budget in how much we spend. I think that'd be great. Well, it's conceivable.
But we could talk about process. We could clarify process or make changes, as Peggy mentioned, with the budget. There is some stuff we could do on budget on this charter, for sure.
So aside from outreach, and I'll email Jesse. And if it sounds like if you guys would access Rita, and if you need me to do anything, let me know. Lauren, I'll just send you a quick blurb.
Actually, one more comment on the outreach.
Sure.
The senior center probably has.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
List.
Yep. Matt, if you can create something that's kind of shareable in a document and online, then we can start pushing it out too as well to there's got to be a dozen Madison CT websites, and we can just push it out saying, come to the meeting, with the link embedded to go to the town.
Yeah, definitely.
Calendar.
Okay, so yeah, I'll draft each, so I can draft something up and then push it out, and then we can just take that and go to each group.
Yeah, and if you, Matt, if you need any help with that or what, I think just shoot me a note.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But yeah, I think anything just to say we're having this discussion, the charter is our structure of town government, and here's the Zoom link. I don't know that you need a whole lot more than that, aside from a welcoming invitation.
Yeah, no problem. Joe, I want to go back to during the meeting, right? So, maybe asking some questions that are going to open up dialogue. Do we want to start asking questions about some of the big, ticket, the big, hairy topics, or do we want to keep it light or open?
Well, I'm leery because it sounds like this first meeting is supposed to be inbound by statute. So it sounds like we're not supposed to be doing forward-looking work until we have this first inbound meeting. Lauren, is that how you took the process away? So.
Yeah, it's basically just supposed to be gathering information from the public. So you really shouldn't be leading them down the path of here are the changes we think should happen. But you can say, that you've met with members of the Board of Selectmen and that they've drawn concern about some items and you're happy to take public comment on any public concern on those items.
Yeah, or maybe we can even ask it in a way of saying, one issue, we have a Board of Finance and we have a Board of Selectmen. Have any of you had interaction with them? Is it clear what each does? Not every town does it the same way. We build our budgets in a certain way in the conversation. Do you think it's responsive enough? We have 2-year terms. One of the things we're curious about is how we vote. Peggy, one thing I'd like to plant in your mind, it always strikes me in Madison that it's a little bit strange that you take over 10 days after the election, 5 days after the election, it's something like that. I don't know many people in life that are positioned, if we have an open and inclusive government, that can quit their job and run out. Like you need to, we assume a certain availability of people economically and functionally to become first selectmen. And I think there's a lot about that isn't very inclusive just in its nature. So
yeah, that's definitely was on my list of needing more transition time. Part of that is also how we run our budget process into also, and so that has to be kind of thought through. Real quickly, Joe, I wanted to mention, so moderator. Okay, the moderator is, first of all, it's kind of just says the tradition is really we have people who show up and are assigned to be the moderator, right? So I think for a town meeting, so that's something that need to be addressed. But even more urgently, we need a town moderator for this Thursday. Joe, would you like to do that job for us? Did you get my message?
No, I didn't. I'm so
I
sorry.
I left a voicemail for you. Maybe I have an old number.
Hold on. Well, I've been on Zoom calls.
Okay.
Oh, are you calling from a New York number?
Yes.
See,
you thought it was spam, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, damn it. I never owned that car and I don't want to extend the warranty. Thursday the
Yeah.
8th.
So Ron Clark is
time?
kind of the traditional person
Yeah,
for
sure.
the planning and zoning. And
Sure, I'm happy to do it.
Okay,
Just
great.
have someone send me the stuff.
And then I think from a process standpoint, and in terms of how this is done from a charter standpoint, this needs to be cleaned up a little bit too, I think.
Yeah.
Just like maybe there's a list that is voted on by the Board of Selectmen of moderators,
So
and then
Ira actually mentioned that to us in one of our calls, that
Okay.
what we do is unusual, that a lot of times towns appoint the moderator slate, and that way you kind of have it worked out ahead of time.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're doing the jumble.
So Peggy, I just want to say, Peggy, you bring up a good point too. There's a lot of areas in the charter that just doesn't explain enough. A lot of new people coming to town, myself included, people that we know, they're not familiar with this form of government, or even that the charter exists or what the charter is. So when they actually go to it, we don't even know what a moderator does, what that function is. So, so you bring up a good point with this, because this is one of the things that we have to work on with this document.
Yeah, it is. It is an assumption, I think, that, well, that's the way it's always been. So that's of course how it should be. But yeah, I think, and so it is good to have, I think, some newer, people, perspective, new people that are new to town and aren't familiar with this as much, to get your perspective. So
if I could, I promised Joan, I'm like, oh, don't worry, we'll be quick. She's had to jump off. So in the interest of time, what I would suggest is, to the extent anyone gets ideas about, communication, or if you have any thoughts about other ways we can run this first hearing, let us know. To the extent that, I'm going through it and I'm forgetting something key, like, hey, we're going to be having more meetings, just jump in. Or send me a thing and I'll bring that up. But otherwise, my thought was we would go directly into, so our meeting next week will be the public hearing. So we won't be doing the Tuesday meeting, and we should listen and see what we get. And, Matt, thanks for agreeing to do some communication.
No, absolutely. And then my homework, so within tomorrow or the next day, I'll get something together that has, that's welcoming what we're doing, kind of a call to action, and also the Zoom link, and I'll send it out to everyone so you can just copy and paste into whatever channel you've got.
Perfect. And Liz, you haven't been reading the chat, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind serving as vice chair for meetings. So in the off chance that I'm not available, you just take over. Or if you really like the job and end up killing me at home, then you rise in that way. But I thought that if you wouldn't mind serving in that capacity, which I think would be a light lift.
Sure, I'm happy to.
Thank you, Liz. Given the totally on the spot way that I just asked you, but excellent. Well, in that basis, Peggy, I can't thank you enough for coming. If you could come to the public hearing, and that way, if in the right time, if I could call on you and have you talk a little bit about the process, and also maybe bring perspective as to why your board did this to us. But that might be a good conversation starter, at least continuer. And and we'll just send out emails and send them out to everyone you can think of in the next couple of days. And maybe maybe Selectman Murphy wouldn't mind pumping it out on his Facebook channel. I'll send him a text. He's got a pretty good following, but we have the other Madison groups, and Noreen, your lists are very large. So if
Yeah.
I'll use them.
assist. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Okay.
Lauren,
Great,
do we have
thank
any
you.
other business?
We have public comment from Gus Horvath.
Is Gus here?
He's on the other side. So Gus, you can unmute yourself and give your public comment.
Yeah, I had my microphone muted. Just a couple of things. Peggy, you're not the first one to be surprised when you joined the Board of Select Persons that the first select person is only one vote of 5. And the 4 years I was on, I had 3 people who had run for the Board of Selectmen, 2 that I had defeated. So it was a very, very interesting situation. And in the 1980 charter revision, the Taxpayers Association tried to push through that the terms for the Board of Selectmen would be 1 year. And Matthew, you talked about not recognizing that New England are the only 6 states that have town meeting form of government. About 65% of all the municipal governments in the United States are headed by a town manager, professional trained. The information I've sent to you, I hope, has been helpful to give you some background in understanding some of these things. And I have a ton more because I've worked with all of the charter review committees since 1990. And with the exception of the 2006, the charter that we have now. So I hope that information that you got is helpful to you in understanding what's going on. And Peggy, the state statutes purposely make the Board of Finance the power source. And all the Board of Selectmen does under our charter is assemble and recommend. Some towns in their charter, if you want to take a look at this, they make the Board of Selectmen the budget. They actually produce the budget, not the department heads, who then the Board of Selectmen review like we do, and then pass recommendations on to the Board of Finance. But that's possible under state statutes to make the Board of Selectmen the budget thing. And in Guilford, the issue of transferring money between departments and line items within a department was changed about in 2008. And they allow up to certain limits that the first select person and the town director of finance can move money within the department. And with the approval of the Board of Finance, they can move it between departments. So that's in a number of the charters around the state. Madison always been very, very backward on that because they want to keep the Board of Selectmen weak. You guys are just an executive committee headed by a chair. You have 1 vote out of 5. I was constantly reminded that when I was first elected in the late 1980s.
Oh,
But
Gus,
then responsible for everything if anything goes wrong.
yeah.
So, so if any of you guys come up with any questions about historical interest, if it's just of interest to you, or why things are what they are, give them to Joe and pass them on to Peggy and Lauren, and I have about 1.5 feet of documentation on charters. And if I don't know off the top of my head, I know where to get it.
Well, Gus, I wanted to thank you. I know you sent us some information, and sorry I didn't reach out to you earlier. I really appreciate it. And to the extent that you have time to come to these meetings, I always respect your perspective on this. I think part of what you said about the division of the boards, I agree. Even in my time, closely held by some people, and though I am concerned that part of the way the boards are structured now, there's the change is that there are a lot of people that just simply don't even know,
Yeah.
and I think to the extent we can start with this conversation. Are you going to come to the public hearing, Gus?
Yes, I'll be there.
Perfect. So I think that would be great, and feel free to help us with that conversation in the public comment parts, because I think that would be incredibly useful as always.
Okay.
Joe, may I just ask us, Gus, one of the things you gave us was a list of forms of government on all 169 towns. I'm trying to think back what year that was.
That was printed. I used that in the 2015 charter review, and then you see the manual annotations, the ones that I was aware of where there were any changes.
So good. Is there some way that we
those
could get
annotations were on a list that was, I think we got it from Connecticut. The
CCM, I think, Gus.
Yeah, I have an updated spreadsheet from
Oh, good.
CCM.
I don't know whether it's been updated or not by CCM or not. I got it originally from CCM back in 2015.
Perfect. All right. Well, Gus, we appreciate you coming to this meeting. We look forward to you coming to our others as well. And Lauren,
And don't be disappointed by not getting a lot of people to participate, because you're not going to get a lot. We've got 14,000 members of our legislative body, and if you get 20 or 30 out, you're going to be really doing good.
Well, I think I think our definition of a lot is pretty easy to satisfy. So I think we're there, and and thank you for bringing it up, and for bringing up the stuff available by CCM, the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. That's
Do we still belong to COST, Council of Small Towns?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm saying yeah,
There's
sure.
also
Unless we dropped off in the last 2
through
years.
them.
Yeah. And the attorneys we've engaged are talking to them as well. So I'm hoping we'll get something.
Okay.
We're rounding right on time. So we went the whole time. So my promise of a short meeting was a total deception.
My fault.
No, Peggy, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. And any other questions from the group? All right. In that case, can we entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Excellent. All in favor of leaving?
Aye.
Great. I'll see you at the public hearing. Lauren, I'd like to make sure that link is active, so we can all show up a couple of minutes early, and then, get ourselves ready. And Peggy, thank you again for coming. And I will see you Thursday. If you'll send me the invite and the info, so I know what to do.
Yeah, okay. And thank you very much for everybody participating in this. It's clearly an important step for us to move forward. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And
Thanks, Peggy.
this is a really good group. So thank you, Peggy. See you, everybody.
Good night. Take
Bye.
care.
Night.
Night.